college's view on cannabis?
Well, cannabis is, in the eyes of the law, an illegal drug, and therefore the college views it as unacceptable for cannabis to be brought onto the campus or to be used on the campus. If I or another member of staff discovers someone with cannabis or using cannabis on the campus, we have a policy around what happens next. So there's a process that we'll go through in terms of taking action against the student.
And is there any like for the children, students to get help for drug abuse, like if they're using it?
Yeah. There's a fairly new organisation called Turning Point, which is set up in Somerset, and that is an organisation that provides information around drugs and advice and support and counselling. So what they do is they actually try to discourage people from using drugs, but accepting that a lot of young people particularly do use drugs, they try to give information and guidance to young people about how to safely use drugs and minimise harm. And I've been able to arrange with Turning Point for one of their outreach workers to come into college. His name is Nick Ross, and he's available for 2 hours every week in the college, actually in this room. I've advertised the times when he's available in the days. So if someone was worried about their drug use, wanted some information, they could come and see Nick, and it would be confidential. Nick doesn't give me any information at all. And so that student would get the help they need. Yeah.
Do you think cannabis should be legalised?
I think it's a difficult one, because I have very strong views about cigarette smoking and drink. And if someone was to say to me, which out of these three would you make illegal? And the list was cannabis, smoking and drink. I personally would say ban drink, because I think so many families are affected by abuse of drink. So many women suffer violence because of their partner's heavy drinking. I think so many deaths on the road and accidents are caused by drink. So I'm far more concerned about the use of drink than cannabis. It's a difficult one, that because there is a view that cannabis isn't addictive. Now, I believe it is, and I've actually worked with a few young people who've had great difficulty getting off cannabis, and they've actually suffered hallucinations, and also they've had real mood swings, which has affected the behaviour. And one in particular was quite violent to his mum on a regular basis, and I think that was directly related to the use of cannabis. I think, like any drug, one person can use cannabis and it might be harmless, doesn't have any serious effect or harmful effect on them. But another person may use it and it may change their personality.
Depends on
quite
the
dramatically.
individual.
Yes, it often comes down to the individual, yeah.
So do you think it probably wouldn't work if they legalised cannabis? Do you think that it would lead on to, do you think it leads on to harder drugs?
Right.
Or
I can see the advantage of, or one possible advantage of legalising cannabis, because what would happen is that, I assume what would happen is, like, people now go into a shop to buy cigarettes, they would also go into that shop and ask for an ounce of cannabis. If that happened, then it would mean that people wouldn't have any contact, cannabis users wouldn't have any contact with drug pushers. Now, I've come across quite a number of young people in my time who used harmless drugs, and they would get that from a pusher on a regular basis. But there were occasions when they went to the pusher and said, okay, I want some cannabis again. And the drug pusher said, well, you ain't got any cannabis, but I've got something else. It's just as good and it's just as cheap. And that's one unfortunate way that some people can actually get hooked onto more harmful drugs. So if cannabis was legalised, then I think the advantage of that would be that it would take people away from that contact with drug pushers.
Do you agree with cannabis use for medical reasons?
I don't know a lot about it, but it certainly seems to actually work for people who have certain medical conditions. I think if it reduces pain, and if it helps someone in a very positive and constructive way, then as long as it's given through prescription by the doctor, then I think it should happen.
What did you think of Ms. Short from the Labour Party saying about, we should find out more about legalising it and that? Did you hear about that?
I didn't see the interview. I did hear about it. I mean, there was an uproar. I mean, I think Claire Short, I've got a lot of respect for her because I think she's very direct and she says what she thinks. And one thing that I'm quite disappointed about in our society is that there seem to be some taboo subjects, and drugs is an issue which a lot of people are concerned about, particularly adults, and yet a lot of them won't encourage debate or discussion, particularly with young people, about it. And if that doesn't happen, then we're not going to kind of move in any positive direction. So yes, I think Claire Short was right. I mean, what should happen is we look at the possible advantages and disadvantages of legalising cannabis. We need to think it through. We need to go through that process to make an informed decision. I think, unfortunately, society seems to have this kind of entrenched view which is about drugs, which is say no to drugs, full stop. And what I think a lot of adults aren't taking on board is the fact that a great percentage, and I think over 50% of young people, by the time they've got to 15, have tried drugs at least once. And if drug use is that common, then we need to look at whether or not it's better to legalise cannabis.
Do you think that some of the older generation don't know enough about it?
Yes.
Because they don't, like they tell their children that all drugs are bad. Do you think they should be informed more, about cannabis?
Yes. We pulled together last year a policy on drugs in this college, and part of our strategy is to try and work more with parents of students so that they are informed.